Hello everyone! Today I wanted to do a kind of story-timey video and I wanted to discuss how I learned Spanish essentially. I realized that I did one for English but I never did one for Spanish. And yeah, so it was time to do one. So I made some notes on my phone, but I really wanted it to be sort of like storytelling, so I'm gonna improvise a lot. And as you know, I like to try new formats and new ways of making my videos because that's something I enjoy. Anyway, so just a bit of disclaimer, my Spanish is not perfect. I consider myself to be fluent to some respect, but I will explain that into more details later on in the video. And if you want to watch some videos of me speaking Spanish, I will put two of these videos in the description box below, because I did 2 videos in Spanish, so I'm not gonna sort of showcase my Spanish here. Anyway, so let's get started. So I think what I'm gonna do for this video is sort of divided into 3 parts, and I'm gonna start with my first few years with Spanish, so sort of like my first encounters. So I need to explain the context of my family a little bit so you can understand a little bit, you know, how Spanish sort of came into my life. So as a kid, I grew up speaking 2 languages, French and Portuguese, because my parents are Portuguese, but I was born here in Paris. And quite early on, because my grandmother was sort of hanging out with other immigrants when she immigrated to France, she met a lot of Spanish speakers. So that's essentially my first sort of interactions with Spanish, let's say. So as a kid, I wasn't fluent because my main languages were really just French and Portuguese, but very early on, I would hear Spanish a lot. So in a sense, Spanish has always been a natural language for me. I'm not too sure if I would consider myself to be a native speaker or not, because, I mean, I don't know, native speaker, usually the connotation is that you're fluent in the language, although that's arguably not true, and that's a video I need to do at some point on my channel, but I digress. But I think to some extent we could say I'm sort of close to near native in Spanish, although I don't think I'm a native speaker. I think really my native languages are French and Portuguese, and that's it essentially. Anyway, so I used to go to Spain quite a lot because of the fact that my grandmother had many Spanish friends and they became, some of them, part of the family. So I used to go to Spain once a year, and I wouldn't say that made me fluent. Obviously I could speak some Spanish already. I'm always worried I'm going to say Japanese instead of Spanish. I do that sometimes. So it's definitely a video about Spanish. So I used to go to Spain once a year, or twice sometimes, and I used to meet lots of Spanish speakers, but I wasn't really fluent, so I can't really say I've developed my speaking skills, I guess. But definitely my listening skills improved, and I think up to now I'm pretty good and pretty comfortable at understanding Spanish and having conversations in Spanish, even though sometimes that means that I wouldn't reply in Spanish necessarily, but that's something I can go back to a little bit later. And yeah, I remember, I mean, I made a video about this particular moment or my first interactions with Spanish. But yeah, as a kid, I used to really enjoy speaking Spanish, even though I probably mostly spoke Portuguese, thinking it was Spanish, but I tried. And I have very fond memories of Spain, especially going to Castilla y León, which, I don't know, it's something, I don't know, it's special in my heart because that's almost where I grew up as far as holidays are concerned, if that makes sense. I mean, I just feel like I had a bit of my life spent in Spain, essentially. So then I'm going to move on to the second part, I guess, which is when I went to school. I mean, I was already going to school, but what I mean is when I started taking Spanish as a subject in school. And I think that really helped me. I know a lot of people say that language lessons were useless. After 4 years they couldn't say anything. But in my case, and obviously we need to take into account that I already had some experience with Spanish, and I used to sort of speak it every now and then at home or in my sort of private life, let's say, outside of school. So I think that definitely helped. But I was also really hardworking, you know, learning the vocab, revising the grammar, and I think the motivation also helped me to get a good level, to the point that I think I I would say I was fairly fluent by the time I was 18, because I was doing a lot of Spanish. I loved it. Like, I feel like Spanish came so naturally to me because I enjoyed it. I don't think I have a talent for Spanish or any languages in general, but I just have, I'm just very keen. So I think that helps, and that makes you more motivated. Therefore, you put in more work, and etc., etc. And what's interesting is that I originally wanted to be a Spanish teacher, and I was studying really hard in school. I had Spanish as a main subject, so I was doing 3 hours, and there was an option to do 3 more hours. Well, I think I was doing 2 of Spanish and then 3 extra hours of Spanish. So that means that I was doing 5 hours of Spanish a week, and then obviously the homework. So I think I was probably doing 8 hours of Spanish every week or something. So I was doing quite a lot, and that really helped me improve. And I was quite happy with the grades I got. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm boasting and stuff, but I really was proud. I mean, I got an 18 in the written assignment out of 20. That's how it works in France. I did mess up the oral examination. I got 13 out of 20, and I got really nervous to the point that I remember I forgot how to say hat in Spanish. Even though I was doing like Spanish, like advanced, like extra Spanish hours. So the examiner was obviously not impressed. Anyway, it happens. I was still very happy with it, and yeah, and I feel like, as I said, I felt like I was quite fluent. Obviously, I wasn't like fluent to the point of being able to talk about politics, you know, super comfortably. I mean, I was 18 anyway. Can 18-year-olds talk about these topics in general unless they study it at university? I don't think so. But I was fairly comfortable. And I still am to some extent, but I'm going to move on to the next part. Let me just scroll down on my phone. And in adulthood, I didn't really do Spanish, or at least not formally. It's kind of due to my circumstances. So as I said, I thought I wanted to be a Spanish teacher, but then I ended up not being an English teacher, because I didn't in the end, but I was sort of going more towards being an English teacher, but then I went to England and then decided to teach French. But anyway, so English was my focus. So Spanish kind of became sort of like secondary, I guess, or it didn't really have much of my attention, because my attention was fully on English. But I still had some opportunities to sort of use it. So when I did my PGCE, so my teaching degree, I had to teach French, and also alongside I had to teach Spanish a bit. I kind of hated it because I don't know, I didn't feel like I was proficient enough, and I forgot a lot of words, because in a year or two you forget so much. Well, actually no, that was 3 years, because I did a BA in English for 3 years where I didn't know Spanish. So after 4 or 5 years, I basically had forgotten a lot of my Spanish. I hope you're keeping up with the timeline, but I'll repeat just in case. So when I did my PGCE, so my teaching degree, it was 2 years into me living in the UK. And before that, I had done a 3-year degree in English. So that was 5 years without, you know, any formal Spanish, or at least no practice, you know, even with natives. So I was very rusty, and it wasn't a bad experience, but I definitely wasn't very comfortable with it, and I didn't like teaching it, not because of Spanish, but because I didn't have the confidence and the sort of knowledge, subject knowledge, to teach it. But the good thing is that because I speak Portuguese, and obviously French helps, and I did a bit of Italian, I've got all these languages that always sort of help me with Spanish. So even if I forget some words in Spanish, I can always usually understand the meaning, because they sound like Portuguese words. I mean, they don't sound, because the two languages sound very different, but they will look like Portuguese words. So that helps me a lot, to the point that if Spanish speakers speak to me in Spanish, I will be able to understand very easily, unless they use, you know, very local slang, especially if it's outside of Spain, because Spain is the only sort of dialect I really know, I guess. So if they have another variety of Spanish, then obviously I'll get more confused, but you see what I mean. So I can still understand quite a lot. So if people write comments in Spanish, and sometimes you guys do, which I think is great, and I love when people interact with me in Spanish. I do feel a bit too self-conscious about replying in Spanish, but I really enjoy it when people speak to me in Spanish. It's great. I mean, I don't know, and it makes me feel good, because also, when my colleagues back when I was in England, they used to speak to me in Spanish because they knew I understood everything. Like, I love that, because I felt like they weren't trying. They knew I could understand it. They weren't trying to sort of be like, oh, he kind of doesn't really speak Spanish, or like kind of be, what's the word? be condescending, I guess, by sticking to English. And I felt like, I love that people know that I can understand it. I don't know, I feel like it's quite empowering, even though my active skills in Spanish are quite very rusty, I would say. But recently I've been speaking actually quite a bit of Spanish, so maybe my level will go back up to where it was. That'd be great. And I'm actually planning, maybe in the distant future, why not, to live in Spain. That would be great. I would love that. Or maybe, you know, for just a few months, if a year is too long. And yeah, I have to say that I do have a bit of frustration with Spanish, which is that I used to be so comfortable with Spanish. I could talk about almost anything because that's what we used to do in school. And now knowing that I'm really rusty, there's not a lot of things I'm really comfortable talking about in Spanish. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can express myself quite comfortably. If I lived in Spain, I would be fine for sure, minus having to look up a couple of words every now and then. But I do feel frustrated, and I know like everyone is telling me, Kevin, you should do immersion and stuff, and I know it would help a lot. But time, you know, I'm focusing on Japanese, so you know, Spanish is kind of in the background for now, but I'm still kind of using it, which is great. So maybe I need to sort of reconsider, you know, how I balance the time I spend on each language. But yeah. And I guess, how could I finish this video? Yeah, so essentially if I had to recap, I didn't quite make it clear, but the main things that helped me for Spanish was obviously going to the country, but not just going to the country and just magically absorb the language, but I really had the opportunity to experience the language, which was great. That means that I was in contact with natives, and that made the language quite alive for me. So for me, Spanish is not like a textbook language, even though it was at some point in my life, but really for me that was a real language with which I had real, you know, human, real life experience. So I think that really helped me to be motivated, because Spanish for me had meaning, you know, from a deep level, deep emotional level, and it still does to some extent. I don't know where I was going with this. Yes, that was, you know, the things that helped me to learn Spanish, but definitely doing Spanish formally at school was really helpful as well. And as I said, I know there's a lot of people that kind of disagree with this idea, that going to school is useful. You know, guys, you do you and I do me, right? You know, it's no big deal. If you think that's not for you, then who am I to tell you otherwise? But I think it's quite helpful because it gave me structure. But now I think what would help me the most would be immersion, because that's pretty much how I learned English, and I did a very long video on how I learned English, which I will put in the description box below if I don't forget, so you can check it out. But I think, like, I'm definitely pro immersion, even though I do see the benefit of learning grammar, and I love grammar, so that's my bias, meaning that I will say to anyone who's willing to listen that grammar is the best thing ever. But I do think immersion, especially when you're at my level, I don't think it would be that beneficial to practice grammar. I think what I need is to just do a bit of practice, because I'm kind of there in Spanish, but I just need, you know, help to sort of recover all the verb conjugations that I forgot. But if I hear them, I recognize the verbs, kind of thing. So I just need to sort of recover that. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend, if you are in the same situation as me, you know, like you've studied Spanish a lot, or you used to be fairly fluent. If you're in that situation, then I don't recommend doing sort of grammar practice, but maybe speaking practice or reading or listening practice would probably be the best, because you can already understand quite a bit, I guess. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. That was quite fun to do. I really enjoy sharing my experience. If you have any questions, then please, you know what to do. Put a comment right now and ask me your questions, and don't forget to subscribe. That's how you can support this channel, and put a like, give a like, you know, that's always nice to see people liking my content. And I will see you next week. Bye.